Hey everybody, I'm Nettie Owens with Sapari Solutions, and let me hide this for a second. You'll get that later. This is Jason Howell, Certified Financial Planner, and I'm so excited to have him here. Highly recommended from Susan Rose, who you may remember came on for one of our earlier interviews. I'm going to take just a brief moment to let you in on who Jason is and why you want to be listening to him today. So, and even as I was reading his bio right before this, I was super impressed. We'll dig into that in just a minute. Jason Howell is a certified financial planner, professional, and former U.S. Congressional candidate. And in 2019, he was listed as one of the top wealth advisors by Washingtonian magazine. He's also president of Jason Howell Company, a family wealth management firm that develops regular net worth parents into patriarchs and matriarchs. Well, I certainly like the sound of that. He does that by walking them through decisions and unique family governance process. Thank you for that great description, because not everybody has something so clearly articulated. And
welcome.
So we're jumping into continuing the conversation of what businesses need to know right now. And I'd love if we could sort of bring some insight into the conversation we just had right before we jumped on.
Okay, sure. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was going to say initially, know your numbers, which is what you expect a financial advisor to say. But during these times, I'd also say know your legislation. There's been so much that's been passed in the month of March. You've heard about the CARES Act. Everyone has heard of the CARES Act, but that was phase 3 legislation of all the stuff that had been written so very quickly. It took about 30 days for legislation to come through. If you contrast that with 2008 and that 2009 timeframe crisis, it took them 7 months to pass the first bit of legislation. So a lot has happened with Congress on fiscal stimulus, and a lot has happened with the Federal Reserve on monetary stimulus. In fact, so much so that that's why our markets are doing so well. In large part, not because our economy is doing awesome. We all know it isn't. But because there's so much monetary stimulus, so much happening with the Federal Reserve, that creates a lot of money flowing around. That's called liquidity and credit, which means companies can do a lot of things. Large companies, the ones that actually move the markets, they can do a lot of things for a lot of months that more often than not, they can't do when things tighten up.
Interesting. And that's such an interesting perspective too, because I noticed, everybody's sort of got their angle on financial planning, on personal finance, and I have not actually heard a lot of other planners bring in this this legislative awareness that you're talking about, but it's so critical. You're right. Everybody knows and has been talking about the CARES Act, and there's a huge swath of the population that has been impacted by that in a positive way. And to even know that legislation was passed so quickly, 7 times faster.
Yes.
That's truly amazing, truly amazing. So we were supposed to be jumping in to kind of talk about a little bit about why or what your big idea is here in finance. And so I'd love to hear about that big idea, especially as it relates to business owners. What do you think they need to know right now?
Well, even the smallest business owners, they're dreamers. They're people that believe in something, and it's the big reason why they didn't just take a check as an employee. And what they should know is everything they believed and dream is actually possible. Now, that's not just because of being Pollyanna or because we're America, though that has a lot to do with it. Having a good outlook and being in the right country is really important, but also because of real, true numbers. If you work your business in the way that's intentional, that you say you actually do want to pass wealth down to the next generation of your family, you do want to change the trajectory of your family's last name, it's very possible for you to do that. The reason that a lot of business owners maybe don't do that is they haven't been maybe as intentional as they've been growing their business. Now, I'm in a professional services business like a lot of our listeners, and I have to be very intentional about what I'm building. I can build something just around me. I mean, it's called Jason Howell Company, right? So you figure, oh, that's all he's doing. That's not my goal. Okay. My goal is 100 years from now, I'll be dead and so will my clients, but I want the firm to be serving their grandchildren. And with that goal means you do a few things along the way. You don't pay yourself as much. You have employees when you don't necessarily need to have them because you could just work 12 hours a day. And you grow the business in a way that it can be sellable later in life, or something that you can pass down and exit and have that liquidity event for yourself later in life. And so keeping that perspective is part of my big idea. And that is regular net worth people can become high net worth people in one generation. They just need to know how to do it.
I'm just so excited about everything that you just said. I want to like jump into to all of those topics. But I really love how you narrowed down three things: that the paying yourself a little bit less, right? And because you've got this bigger plan that's not about you necessarily becoming. You're saying it's possible to become that high net worth person, but it's one stepping stone as part of it. And so you may pay yourself a little bit more. You hire people rather than kill yourself working 12 hours a day. But in that, you spread the wealth. Like you become a giver of hope. I mean, I'm excited when I get to hire people, and that means they get to pay their families. Like that truly thrills me. And then the third point, and I just had it in my head, but if you could say it again.
Well, the third point about moving from a regular net worth to a higher net worth and how it is possible. Yeah, I mean, it begins with that idea that I had before we started talking about that political side, which is knowing your numbers. If you have a really strong idea around your numbers, then it becomes much more tangible. And how do you do that practically? I'll tell you what I do first thing in the morning. I sit at the computer. Number one, I turn on my timer to make sure I manage my time, because that's,
oh my gosh, you're just speaking my language. I'm so
absolutely right. I'm not surprised. You know what you're doing. So I mean, that your time is the most precious resource, because everyone does not have the same amount. No one knows how much of time they're going to have over the long run. The day is the same, but overall we don't know. So I put that timer on, and then I open up all my bank accounts. And I may have just done it yesterday, but I look at them all and I look at those balances. And if that doesn't, make you serious, then I don't know what will, because that says exactly what, you've got going on and the capacity you have. But you start building on that practicality from the very beginning. So you start to be so aware of your numbers that everything you're doing to impact them, whether it's time or money, you're very conscious of. And you are smart, and your listeners are very likely smart, and they're ambitious. So my sort of hypothesis has always been, and this is the case with my clients, if you're a financial advisor client, you have to be a little well-to-do, you have to be a little ambitious, and you're probably pretty smart enough to know to outsource stuff you don't know. And so I don't have to worry about my clients not being smart enough once I present the opportunity for them. But it sometimes has to be presented, because we're so busy doing the things that people hire us to do because we're so gosh darn smart. And so if I can make that present for you, and if you can make it present for yourself, you'll be much closer to the dreams and expectations that you have for you and your family.
So do you ever work with people to help bring these concepts and ideas to their employees as well? I mean, it's one thing when you're working with the employer and helping them build that generational wealth and become a high net worth person in business. Is that something that you help them share down through those that that they've hired to?
Staff. I've been so fortunate, because a lot of times employers will invite me to come and present to their folks. And I wrote a book that was published last year called The Joy of Financial Planning. And so they tell me to bring the book with me, and maybe they'll pick up a few copies for the staff, and they'll have an opportunity to take that deep dive into a lot of the concepts that I understand and that I believe. And so I'll share that with them verbally. Honestly, a W-2 person, though, is a lot different from a business owner. So they internalize it, I think, a little bit differently than the person who's gone out and taken their wits about them and started a firm. And I recognize that. And that's why I have a resource like a book or a podcast. Joy of Financial Planning is the name of the podcast, too. Or if people are ambitious, they can get there one way or one mechanism or another.
I think that's really important to distinguish. There are different goals, and that's important to recognize where those lines are. So we only have a few seconds left, actually. I know this time just flies really quickly. So if people would like to get in touch with you, they can go to your website and check you out there. Sounds like you have a podcast, you have the book, and maybe just one parting word as we sign off here.
Know your numbers. Everything is possible for you just like you expected. It's just a lot harder than it was for your parents and your grandparents. You can't just work hard and it'll work out. You do need to do things to the best of your financial ability. And my hypothesis is if you get your finances right and you know what you're doing with your time, you will get everything that you need and most likely everything that you want.